Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the What If guy, back with another fanfiction. This is the first part of What If Issei Loved Raynare Forever. Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Well, I did it. I had been able to keep a girlfriend for 3 months, and our anniversary was coming up. I planned a nice date because I was sure Yumma would be happy. To think it started in a weird way with her asking me out. I had a reputation for crude jokes with my friends, but now it was just the two of us because Yumma had taught me to be more respectful in public. My friends Matsuda and Motohama even met her and gave me a hard time because she was so impressive. I was a bit sad that Yumma went to a different school, so I could only see her 2 or 3 times a week if I was lucky. She had even told her father, Azazel, about me, although she had not called us a couple yet. The history teacher asked the class what had caused the First World War and which countries had entered it first. I admitted I did not know and hung my head. History was one of the few subjects I struggled with because of all the dates and details. The teacher moved on, and all I wanted was for the bell to ring since it was the last class of the day. When the bell rang, I pulled out my phone and sent a text to Yumma with the plan for our date on Sunday. On Sunday I met Yumma at the mall at 1 in the afternoon, having arrived 20 minutes early so I would not be late. We looked through the shops she liked, then went to an arcade for some dance games. When we got hungry we went to a cafe, and I planned to end the date with a walk in a nearby park to watch the sunset. Yumma wore a white blouse and a black skirt, and her hair was down. I wore a gray blazer over my school shirt with olive green pants, my brown hair messy as usual. As the date went on I could tell Yumma seemed sad, even though she tried to keep a cheerful face. We had been together long enough that I could tell when something bothered her. I bought her a pink wristband to cheer her up, and it helped for a while, but I noticed she kept rubbing it on her wrist. I worried more as we moved from place to place. At the park we sat on a bench with a clear view of the orange sun sinking toward the horizon. Yumma rested her head on my shoulder, and a comfortable silence settled over us. I wanted to know what was wrong. The teacher had not been the only one to ask questions that day. I asked Yumma what was troubling her. She wiped away a single tear and sniffled, and that made me both angry on her behalf and sad. I told her I did not want to see her cry and that I would do my best to fix whatever was wrong. Yumma turned to me and after a brief, tender moment between them, she apologized. She explained that she had not wanted this to happen, that something about orders had changed, and she began to cry, sobbing in distress. The explanation was fragmented and confusing, but it was clear she was upset and overwhelmed. Suddenly, I felt a sharp shock and staggered, clutching my midsection as dizziness washed over me. I stumbled backward and fell from the bench, my back against the ground. The scene unfolded in a whirlwind, and the details blurred. There was no need for graphic description. Yumma begged for forgiveness, saying she had not wanted this and that the order had changed unexpectedly. She cried harder, shaken by what had occurred. Even in that moment, I told Yumma I was not angry with her. Heavily breathing, I urged her not to cry and said that I wanted to see her smile again. The bench, the sunset, and the park held a quiet, heartbreaking stillness as everything slowed around us. She nodded, wiped her tears, forced a smile for him, and pressed a gentle kiss to his forehead. His vision blurred as Yumma turned away and folded wings unfolded from her back. The sunlight washed them out of color, but to him she might as well have been an angel. She told him he was the one, then she took to the sky and flew away. He could only watch as she disappeared. A woman's voice spoke from behind him, noting that she sensed holy energy nearby, but he could not turn to look. He was gravely wounded and growing weak, darkness creeping in at the edges of his vision. The woman observed that he appeared near death. Strange circles with symbols glowed red at his feet, bathing him in a mystical light that scanned him like a magical analysis. The woman determined that he bore a sacred gear but could not identify it with a mere scan. She decided to attempt a resurrection and asked for his name. He managed to tell her his name was Issei. She placed something over his chest. As she leaned down he made out a blurred face crowned by crimson hair and deep green eyes. Her touch felt like pressure on his heart and pain flared, but he had no strength left to cry out. The woman spoke words he could not make out clearly, and with that he let his last breath go and everything went black. He jerked awake, sweating and breathing hard. It had been the strangest and most frightening dream he had ever had. He forced himself up. He had to get ready for school. At school, the mood had shifted. The girls no longer treated him with hostility. He now found himself on neutral terms with them. Marayama and Keitase no longer bothered him about past incidents. He met his friends Matsuda and Motohama by the staircase to the first floor. As they greeted each other, the well-known senior Rias descended the stairs, glancing in their direction. Matsuda gushed that Rias was beautiful and that she had looked their way, his admiration obvious. Issei responded that he supposed so, which shocked Matsuda and Motohama. They reacted as if he had committed some major offense. Motohama asked if he was feeling all right, worried about his condition. Issei reminded them that he already had a girlfriend, but they reacted as if they did not believe him, saying they would have remembered if that were true. He felt frustrated. They had met her in person, so their denial made him feel dismissed. Matsuda suggested that maybe a reminder would help, so Issei pulled out his phone to find a picture of Yumma. He could not find any image or contact information for her. He froze. It was as if months of a life he remembered had been a dream. Something was wrong. Matsuda tried to cheer him up by offering to hang out later at his place, but Issei declined, saying he had other things to take care of. Matsuda and Motohama complained in unison that it was his loss. After school he wandered the town, thinking. He could not shake the feeling that he had been tricked by his own mind into believing a relationship that might never have existed. As he walked, evening fell and he found himself back at the same park where he had died in his dream. He sat on the bench where he and Yumma had once shared a moment and felt a tear fall at the thought that he might never see her again. A voice addressed him from behind, belonging to a man in a trench coat and a gray fedora who gave off an unsettling, threatening air. He recoiled in alarm and took a step backward, then began to run. Black feathers drifted down from the sky, similar to the ones Yumma had worn. He whispered her name and hoped that she might still be out there. The man in the fedora leapt over him and landed in front of him. The man stated that he had little regard for those of lower status, remarking on Issei's situation. Issei wondered if this was another dream, unable to accept that any of this could be real. The man assessed that there was no sign of Issei's supposed allies or master, implying Issei was alone and astray. Issei tried to deflect, but the man produced a spear as though conjuring a weapon from thin air, preparing to strike. The spear glowed in the dark as if it were a source of light. Issei turned to run, but the spear struck his abdomen. He dropped to his knees, pain overwhelming him, and his hands recoiled when the light burned at the slightest touch. The attacker taunted that light was like poison to Issei's kind and promised the next strike would finish him. The spear vanished, and the sudden cold and pain pushed Issei into unconsciousness. A red circle appeared beside him, and Rias Gremory stepped through it. She took Issei into her arms and vanished. Rias fired a concentrated energy blast to stop the fedora-wearing man from sending another spear at her pawn. The attacker adjusted his focus to deal with the larger threat and sent a light spear toward Rias, but one of her servants appeared through another portal and intercepted the attack. The servant, Kaneko, was a small girl with short white hair who stepped between Rias and the spear. The spear rebounded into its owner's hands, and he charged at Rias, only to be nearly struck by a lightning strike from another of Rias's servants, Akino, who moved with calm precision. The attacker paused. He studied Rias and recognized her. He introduced himself as Donasik and asked if Issei belonged to her. Rias confirmed that Issei was under her protection and warned that she would show no mercy to anyone who harmed him. Donasik bristled and suggested that Rias should not let her servants wander alone, implying he might kill them, but Rias matched his threat with equal resolve. After a tense standoff, Donasik decided to retreat. Rias took Issei and transported him back to his home to recover. The next morning Issei woke groggy, reaching to silence his alarm. He rubbed his temples and tried to steady his thoughts. He realized he had been dreaming, but then noticed someone else in his room. Rias Gremory was present, and the sight left him confused and anxious. He tried to make sense of what had happened and worried about the consequences, including his relationship with Yuma. Ria stirred and sat up, stretching languidly. She introduced herself plainly, explaining that she was a devil and that Issei was now under her care. The explanation did little to calm him. Issei's mother called from downstairs that he needed to get up for school. Panic surged as he imagined her finding an unexpected guest in his room. He hurried to cover the situation as best he could and moved toward the door, but his mother entered and froze at the doorway. She reacted loudly, announcing the presence of the unexpected guest to the rest of the house and rushing away to tell Issei's father. Issei scrambled to explain that he was awake and tried to manage the chaos. Rias remained composed beside him as they both dealt with the sudden, awkward intrusion into an ordinary morning. How would he explain this to them? More importantly, what had happened? He tried to force his memory back to the previous night and prayed the worst was not true. Rias observed that his family was energetic in the morning and seemed unconcerned about appearances. He found himself wanting to facepalm at her casualness. He impatiently told her to put on some clothes because he had a girlfriend, and a sudden headache made him reel. Rias pointed out that he was a devil now as well and joked that he should not be doing certain things. She moved to a pile of neatly folded clothes in the corner of his room and began dressing herself. Out of nowhere she asked about the condition of his abdomen. He asked how she could know what he had dreamed, and she explained that it had not been a dream and that she had used magic overnight to heal him. He questioned why she had needed to take such measures, and she replied that it had been necessary to restore his body. They finished getting ready and went down for breakfast. His parents accepted Rias's explanation without question, as if everything she said were normal. He walked to school with her despite worrying rumors might start and that he might get in trouble with Yuma. Other students reacted poorly, yelling accusations that he had stolen their admired senior. He did his best to ignore them. At the school gate, Rias told him she would arrange for someone to fetch him later. Just after she walked away, a fist struck his face. Matsuda demanded why it had been him instead of one of them. Motohama urged they hear his explanation first. He tried to defuse the situation with a teasing remark about whether they had ever seen something so surprising, but the rest of the day remained uneventful, which suited him fine. When class ended, the popular boy entered, and the girls swarmed around him. He no longer felt hostility toward the boy. He had a girlfriend now, even though her contact information and photos were gone. Yudo Kiba approached and greeted him. Kiba told him he had come on Rias Gremory's orders. Kiba asked him to lead the way and then escorted him to the old school building. Some students made idle comments as they left, which he ignored. The old building was seldom used and served mostly as storage, though the room they entered looked deliberately arranged. Occult circles and symbols contrasted with an unexpectedly comfortable interior of carpet, elegant couches, and a glass coffee table. A faint sound suggested a shower somewhere nearby. On one couch sat a small, short-haired girl in the school uniform eating a piece of chocolate. He recognized her as Kaneko Tuju, the unofficial school mascot. Kiba introduced Kaneko and Issei Hayadu to each other. Issei offered a nervous greeting, and Kaneko responded with a simple nod before returning to her snack. A girl with a long ponytail tied with an orange ribbon entered, moving with a composed grace and wearing the school's uniform. She introduced herself as Himejima Akino, the vice president, and welcomed him warmly. He introduced himself awkwardly, rubbing the back of his neck. Akino had a reputation as one of the school's most admired seniors, with many students looking up to her. Rias emerged from behind a curtain, fully dressed in the academy uniform and drying her hair with a towel. She thanked them for waiting and admitted she had taken a shower there because she had not felt comfortable using the other facilities. He assured her it was fine. Rias then asked everyone to take a seat. They arranged themselves as she requested. He sat next to Kaneko, while Kiba took a seat beside Akino. Rias was the only one standing, leaning against a huge desk. Rias announced that the Occult Research Club would like to honor his attendance. I felt a strange sting from the memory of being rejected last year when I first heard about the club, and now here I was joining without even asking. That thought sat at the back of my mind. Rias explained that the Occult Research Club was only a facade, more like a hobby for them. I asked what she meant by hobby. Rias said that, to keep the explanation short, they were all devils. Rias added that the black-winged man from the night before had been a fallen angel. She explained that, even though fallen angels had once been soldiers of God, they had fallen due to impure ideas and now tried to control humans and destroy devils. I listened intently, the way someone listens when another is describing their favorite book. It all sounded surreal and made up, but the effort she had put into learning it was impressive. Rias explained that, aside from fallen angels, there were also angels sent by God with orders to kill devils, and that they were being attacked from all sides. Rias asked if I was following so far. I admitted that it all sounded far-fetched. I did not want to insult them, but it was too crazy for my liking. Rias said Amano Yumma. The sudden mention of my girlfriend made me serious. Rias reminded me that I had been a couple with Yumma for about 3 months and asked if I had already forgotten her. Her tone carried a cold edge, like a hunter recounting a great beast he had confronted. Rias asked where I had heard Yumma's name and noted that others seemed to have forgotten her for some reason, but she did not want to talk about Yumma in the ORC room. I stood up with the intention of leaving, perhaps never to return. Out of nowhere, Rias placed a picture of Yumma and me on the desk. It was from one of our dates, Yumma laughing because a pigeon had ruined my shirt. Rias said that Yumma had existed, that she knew that for certain. I put the picture in my bag and sat back down. If they knew something others had forgotten, that was reason enough to stay and listen. Rias told me that Yumma was a fallen angel, like the man who had attacked me the previous night. I interrupted to point out that my friends did not seem to remember her and that her phone number was gone, but Rias cut me off. Aquino explained that Yumma had used her powers to erase memories, the same way Aquino had done with my parents. When I muttered the word job, confused, I could not accept that Yumma's feelings for me had been only a task. I was certain she had cared for me. Rias bluntly clarified that Yumma's job had been to kill me. I protested, telling Rias that Yumma had said the order had changed. Rias considered that Yumma might have been ordered to kill me because of some sacred gear inside me, and that bringing me over to the fallen angels would have been an easier option if she had wanted to recruit me. I asked what a sacred gear was. Aquino explained that a sacred gear was a power randomly given to humans and that those who possessed such powers often left marks on history. Rias added that sometimes people received powers great enough to threaten both devils and angels. Rias instructed me to raise my left hand. I asked why my left. Rias said the choice did not matter. I raised my right hand out of spite. Rias told me to imagine the strongest image I could. I tried to picture something, but when Rias crossed her legs as she leaned against the table, I found myself distracted by her presence and struggled to concentrate. I reminded myself that Yumma was still out there and that I had to stay focused. Rias urged me again to concentrate. I admitted that there was too much to take in at once and that I could not focus properly. Then I asked the question that had been bothering me. If Yumma had killed me, why was I still alive? Rias explained that she had resurrected me. Rias said that Issei was now part of the Gremory family, her peerage, bound to her as a devil servant. As she said this, a pair of bat-like wings sprouted from her back, large and leathery. I remembered Yumma's wings differently, in a softer image, and the sight made me uneasy. It did not take long for the others in the room to show the same trait. Wings emerged from the backs of everyone, the same black, leathery shapes. I felt an itching sensation between my shoulder blades. Taken by surprise, I almost lost my balance when a pair of wings unfolded from my own back. That was when I finally believed the devils were real and that I was no longer fully human. Rias explained that making contracts with a devil could increase a person's powers. Since summoning symbols on the ground were no longer common, Rias said they used pamphlets to find people who might summon a devil. She pointed to a large stack of those pamphlets after her wings retracted. Rias added that usually their familiars handled this, but since I was a newly resurrected servant, the situation was different. I asked about the term servant. He muttered that he had thought slavery had been abolished around the world as he began placing the pamphlets into a bag. Rias explained that peerage was the technical term, that most people did not treat peerage members like slaves because they helped gain status in the underworld, and that doing well could eventually let someone form their own peerage. Issei thought Rias would be the kind of leader who would treat her followers kindly, but the idea still made him uneasy. He told her that he did not need nor want slaves or a peerage and that all he wanted now was Yumma. Rias asked him to get on the job. After finishing packing the pamphlets, Rias handed him a small stone-like device and explained that it helped locate people with strong dark desires who might be willing to summon devils and make contracts. She gave him the go-ahead. He rode his bike with the bag slung over his shoulder, glancing at the device now and then but mostly circling the places where he had once gone on dates with Yumma. He hoped she might be waiting at one of them and wondered if she even knew he had survived, or that he was now a devil. The uncertainty left him both joyful and desolate. He reached the park where he had last seen her and sat on the bench where he had been wounded. Memories came back and a tear fell as he remembered their time together. He stood, wiped his eye, and told himself to stop being sappy and to be strong, because he would find her and be with her again. The self-reminder helped him steady his mood. After handing out the remaining pamphlets, he returned to the club room. He called that he had finished the deliveries as he entered. Rias sat at her desk looking over papers, and Kaneko sat on a couch eating her ice cream. Rias told him she had another job for him. Kaneko had 2 contracts at the same time that night, so he would need to take one of them for her. He agreed to help. Kaneko, still eating her ice cream, offered a quiet thank you. Rias asked Aquino to prepare a magic circle for teleportation. Aquino instructed Issei to raise his right hand, traced a symbol on his palm with a glowing finger, and left a red mark that she identified as the crest of the Gremory clan. Aquino said the crest would let him use the Gremory magic circle for teleportation and asked if he was ready. He responded that he was ready, and she encouraged him before directing him to step into the center of the circle to receive his first contract. He obeyed and the circle flared with bright red light, but when it dimmed he was still standing in the same room. The others regarded him with awkward looks. Rias sounded disappointed and said that if the circle would not work he would have to use the bike. She told Kaneko to give him the address. He accepted the address and set off by bike. The client lived in a modest apartment building. He knocked and greeted Mr. Morisawa politely. A tall man with long hair and glasses opened the door just enough to peer out and told him to go away, then partly closed the door. Issei knocked harder and explained that he was the devil who had been summoned for the night. Through the door, Mr. Morisawa said he had only summoned Kaneko and not a young man. Issei replied that Kaneko had taken on too many contracts that night, so he had been sent in her place. After a short silence, Mr. Morisawa asked why Issei had not arrived by magic circle like Kaneko. Issei admitted he was new and did not know the magic, so he had come by bike. The man hesitated, then opened the door wider and told him to come inside. The man stepped aside and invited him in. Morisawa made me a cup of tea and sat at his desk. He asked if I had any powers to show, which took me by surprise. He then asked, out of curiosity, what kind of abilities Kaneko had. I wondered if I might be able to do something similar, unless it was something inappropriate. Morisawa reached for a costume and made an awkward suggestion, which made me uncomfortable. I put the thought aside. He put the costume back and repeated his question about what I could do. I explained that I could not do anything yet, that I had been resurrected as a devil only the day before and had not had time to learn magic or sacred arts. Being honest felt like the best option. Morisawa asked how I had been resurrected. I told him the truth. I had been killed by my girlfriend, who was a fallen angel, then a high-class devil had found and brought me back for reasons I did not know. I still loved Yumma and believed she loved me too, but I admitted I might be allowing wishful thinking to affect my judgment. Morisawa sympathized and encouraged me to keep talking, so I spent the night recounting what had happened, careful not to drop any revealing names. We talked about Yumma and how she might have felt when she killed me. I kept hoping there was more to her actions than a simple order. When it grew late, I decided to return to the Occult Research Club to tell Rias that I had failed to secure a contract because I had forgotten to ask the man. I moved through the empty streets, using the solitude to work through my worries. A presence slipped up behind me, a powerful, holy aura. I turned and saw a tall, blue-haired woman whose expression was severe and commanding. I felt my heart sink. I did not want to be embroiled in another near-death encounter. The woman spoke, stating that she had the right person and that I matched the description of someone who had been ordered to be killed. Her words made it clear she knew about the mission against me, and if she knew Yumma, she was likely a fallen angel herself. She manifested a spear of golden light and launched it at me. I moved to the side and narrowly avoided the attack. She noticed a mark on me and exclaimed that the Gremory crest marked me as an even greater target. She rose into the air to prepare another strike. I told myself I could not die again. I needed power to defend myself. I called for strength, and a green jewel blazed into being on the back of my right hand. A red glove-like gauntlet formed around it, its design striking and unfamiliar. When the sacred gear awakened, it generated a gust that knocked the woman backward. She retreated, saying she had to report the sighting to her superior, and then she flew away. I had wanted to question her about Yumma and her whereabouts, but she left too quickly. I returned to the Occult Research Club to tell Rias and the others what had happened. Perhaps they could make sense of it. At the ORC, Rias explained that the gauntlet was a sacred gear and that once activated it responded to the user's will. I concentrated and made it vanish, and to my relief it dissolved into nothing. I muttered a nervous remark about being glad it had not stayed, scratching the back of my head. Rias warned that the encounter put us in a difficult position. Now the fallen knew I had been resurrected as a devil. I tried to be optimistic, suggesting that if the woman knew Yumma, she might spread word that I was alive, which could help my search. Rias acknowledged my point but made it clear she only wanted me safe and not further targeted. After the conversation with the president, I went home. Thankfully, no one attempted to kill me that night. I wondered if the string of attacks had become some perverse sport among the fallen. It had been 3 nights in a row that I had been assaulted, and only Yumma had ever succeeded in killing me. I let myself hope she might have won whatever strange contest that implied. I went to my room, tried to stay as positive as I could about the confrontation with the fallen angel, and fell asleep with thoughts of Yumma on my mind. The next morning, my alarm woke me with a girl's playful voice threatening to tickle me. I bought that alarm 2 years ago and it was still working with no problems whatsoever. The morning started like any other before I became a devil. That meant no nightmares and no embarrassing incidents to cause misunderstandings with my parents. I ate the breakfast my mom made every morning and went to school without any questions from my dad or mom. The whole devil thing felt like a strange dream when nothing supernatural happened in the morning and everything was as it should be. As I was walking to school, I heard a girl cry out in pain to my right. I saw a girl in a nun's habit who had tripped and fallen. She sat on the ground rubbing a sore spot and mumbled that she always tripped over something. I hurried to help her. Issei asked if she was okay as he approached, his hand already outstretched to help her up. She took his hand and stood, and just then a strong gust of wind blew her veil off, revealing long blonde hair. Issei thought she looked unexpectedly cute. There was an awkward pause as she held his hand a moment longer than necessary before she let go. Another gust of wind caught the veil and began to carry it away. Issei ran after it and caught it before it could be lost. Asia thanked him when he returned the veil. He offered that it was no problem, then began to walk away, but she touched his shirt and asked for directions with a soft blush that made her seem even more gentle. She said she had lost her way and needed help. Issei hesitated because he would be late for school, but he remembered Yuma's advice to help someone in need, so he decided to assist her. A few moments later, Asia picked up her bag and they started walking together in a random direction. Issei asked her name first. She cheerfully introduced herself as Asia Argento and asked him to call her Asia. He introduced himself as Issei Hayadu. She responded warmly, using his name with an affectionate tone. He then asked whether she was on vacation. She explained that she had been transferred to the town's church. Issei realized she must be a nun, which complicated things in his mind because of his new identity, but she seemed so innocent that it was hard to imagine any harm coming from her. As they walked, a child began crying nearby in a park. They found a boy who had fallen and scraped his knee. Asia hurried to him, leaned close to the injury, and a gentle green glow formed around her hands. The light pulsed and the scrape closed without any graphic details. Issei felt a strange pulse run through his right hand at the same moment. Asia told the boy that the injury was healed and encouraged him to be brave. The boy stopped crying and looked at Asia in awe. Issei realized his right hand had reacted when she healed the boy. He wondered if she had special powers or perhaps a sacred gear, and he kept that thought to himself. Asia commented that she must have surprised him. He told her she had amazing powers. She explained that her abilities were gifts bestowed by God, her cheerful tone unchanged. They walked on in a companionable silence until the church came into view atop a hill. Asia pointed it out and thanked Issei again for his help, then invited him to accompany her to the church. Issei admitted he wanted to go but felt a strong, unsettling holy aura from the building even from a distance, and he still had school. He declined politely, promising he might visit if he had time, and they parted ways. The rest of the walk to school was uneventful, which for Issei meant it went perfectly. After classes, Ria scolded him for getting close to a church. The two of them were alone in the clubroom as she lectured, and he listened. Rias explained that for devils, churches were considered enemy territory and that his uneasy feeling earlier had likely been his devil instincts warning him. She warned that when a devil was near a church, the conflict between devils and angels could escalate and one never knew when attacks might occur. Rias continued that the church's exorcists could also possess sacred gears, and that if an exorcist succeeded in eliminating a devil, the consequences could be total erasure. Issei felt the seriousness of her words and resolved to take the danger more seriously. Rias asked him to be more careful from then on. Issei agreed. With that, Rias left the room and abruptly exclaimed in surprise as she stepped out. "I hated being a devil sometimes." I sat down on the couch, turning over everything Rias had just said. She warned me not to get involved with random people at the church, but it was my nature to help when I could. Most of my perverted tendencies were gone now, and thanks to that I no longer got roughed up by the kendo club every day. They barely noticed me anymore. I could even have normal conversations with Keitase and Murayama, which was a pleasant change from their fierce kendo seriousness. Matsuda and Motohama, on the other hand, kept going their own way and became more disliked each day. I wondered whether I should do something about that. Rias had said she would keep me away from the church, so I hoped Asia would understand if I stopped visiting for a while. A voice suddenly reminded me that Buchu was only concerned about me. The abrupt remark made me jump. I turned to find Akino standing there, quiet as ever. Rias entered the room at that moment. Rias observed that she had thought Akino had already gone home. Akino explained that they had received word from Taiko. A stray devil had been found in the city. When Rias said that, I braced myself. Tonight we were to investigate. We drove out to an old, abandoned storehouse. It felt cliché, but the whole peerage had been called in, so whatever a stray was, it sounded dangerous enough to require everyone. Kiba gave an explanation as we approached. Strays had once been slaves like other devils, but some had betrayed their masters and lived by their own will. Without a master, a stray could use demonic powers without restraint, so we had to be careful. Rias asked what I knew about chess. The question confused me in the moment, but she wanted to teach me a way to understand our roles. She explained that as the master she was the king, and I knew the other pieces already. The queen, 2 knights, 2 rooks, 2 bishops, and 8 pawns. High-ranking devils could grant special powers to their pieces. They called the technique the evil pieces. Rias told me to watch closely how devils fought tonight. A warped, female voice echoed from inside the building, and soon a figure emerged from behind a wall. At first glance she had a human face and shoulder-length black hair, but her form was unsettling. Her upper torso looked human while her lower body belonged to a different, more bestial creature, with heavy fur and large claws. The sight alone sent a chill through me. Rias announced that the stray devil vice had betrayed her master and let her powers run rampant, and that she would now be judged in the name of the Gremory nobility. The demon laughed and taunted them, vowing to strike back. Then she unleashed a corrosive attack that ate into the concrete wall nearby. Rias quickly sheltered us from the spray as it struck and began dissolving the structure. I stared in disbelief as solid concrete slumped under the corrosive influence. Rias warned me not to let my guard down. Kiba called out and then launched himself into action. He moved so fast for a moment I could barely follow him with my eyes. Rias explained that Kiba's position was knight. He specialized in speed and wielded a sword. In a blur he was in front of the stray and, with 2 swift strikes, he disabled its massive forelimbs, knocking the weaponized appendages out of the fight in a clean, decisive motion. The stray shrieked in pain. Kaneko stepped forward simply and resolutely, unafraid of the creature before her. I shouted for her to be careful, but the white-haired girl showed no hesitation. The demon's face contorted into something monstrous. Her teeth lengthened and sharpness appeared where there had been none. The markings on her torso shifted and rearranged themselves, revealing a more threatening, unsettled aspect of her form. The battle was escalating into something far more dangerous. I noticed teeth-like ridges on the creature's stomach and froze. Kaneko still did not move. I worried she had lost her nerve. I shouted for Kaneko to move, not wanting one of my new friends hurt. Despite my warning, Kaneko held her ground. Rias explained that Kaneko was a rook, her specialty was defense, and her attacks were stronger than Kiba's. For a moment there was a tense pause while Kaneko maintained her stance. Kaneko then punched the stray devil and sent it flying into a pillar, shattering it. Thankfully the ceiling held. Rias called for Akino to take over. Akino stepped forward with a teasing, dramatic manner before settling into a serious stance. One of the arm remnants that Kiba had sliced off twitched and leapt toward Rias. I activated my sacred gear and struck it just before it could reach her. Rias stumbled in surprise. I offered my hand and helped her to her feet. Rias ordered Akino to finish the job and explained Akino's role as queen and vice president of the group, emphasizing her unmatched magical abilities. Akino summoned lightning and unleashed it against the stray devil in a relentless, tightly controlled assault. Rias noted, somewhat wryly, that Akino enjoyed the fight more than most. Akino allowed herself a brief, satisfied glance at the creature before ending her attack. When the lightning faded, the stray devil lay badly damaged and smoking, limbs missing and fragments scattered nearby. The scene looked like the aftermath of a violent clash rather than a graceful defeat. Rias approached the fallen creature and, after a moment, asked if it had any last words. The creature turned weakly and spat an insult at Rias. Rias formed a glowing red magic circle and declared the end of the fight. A wave of dark, red-tinged energy burst from the circle and enveloped the stray. When the energy dispersed, the creature was gone as if it had vanished into thin air. Rias announced that the mission was over and it was time to go home. The group replied in unison and began to leave. Before anyone dispersed, I asked Rias which piece I was. I wanted to know if I was as fast as Kiba or as strong as Kaneko. Rias told me I was a pawn. The explanation made me feel small and expendable, but there was nothing more to ask. Everyone else went home with satisfied smiles after a successful mission. I was left feeling out of place. Rias had arranged for this to be my first contract, accompanying a client to the house of someone summoning devils so I could make my own contract. I couldn't argue with the plan. The house was neat, painted white with an upstairs and a front garden. It struck me as the sort of place someone well-off might own. I rang the bell and, after receiving no answer, tried the door. It opened easily. It had been unlocked, which felt strange and put me on edge. The hallway inside was dark. I called out that I was the devil who had been summoned and asked if anyone was home. Moving through the house, a sense of danger rode my skin, the same uneasy feeling I had felt near that old church. Rias had insisted I bring a signed contract with me so I couldn't back out if things felt off. I followed a faint glow to the living room. The door to the room was nearly shut. When I pushed it open, it squeaked like something out of a horror tale. 2 couches faced each other and a few candles burned on the table between them. A man sat on one couch with his back to me. As I stepped further in, something sticky clung to my shoe. Upon touching it, I realized it was fresh blood. A trail of it stretched across the floor and led toward a figure further into the room. The trail ended at a person who had clearly been violently attacked and lay badly injured. The sight was grim and the air felt heavy with alarm. The room looked brutal, the signs of a violent struggle making Issei feel nauseous. The man who appeared to have been summoning something began to declare that sinners must be punished and that he had borrowed the words from the Bible. When he finished, he turned his head and revealed an insane grin. He wore a black coat over a white shirt and white pants. The man introduced himself as Fried Siros and announced that he was there to exorcise devils. He moved and danced with a manic energy that made him seem unhinged. Issei wondered whether the man was really a priest. Fried insisted that he was certainly not a devil, the glint in his eye turning colder as he spoke. Issei took a step back into a lower stance to prepare for defense and pointed at the ruined body in the corner of the room, asking why the man had been killed. Fried explained that he had proof the victim would summon a devil, and that he had killed him after the summoning to make the world safer by reducing the devil's numbers. The cruelty of the claim sent a shiver down Issei's spine. Fried produced a gun in his left hand and a hilt in his right. From the hilt, a blade of white light extended like something out of a science fiction duel. He announced that he intended to cut Issei apart like the previous victim. Issei summoned his sacred gear and used the back of his hand to block the swing of the light blade. Fried moved his left hand and fired. The shot struck Issei's right knee and he collapsed to the floor. Pain flared sharply, but adrenaline tempered it enough for Issei to react. He kicked Fried's legs out from under him, bringing him down, then limped to brace himself against the nearest wall. Fried rose, brushing himself off and finding himself marked by the scene of the earlier violence. He taunted Issei and fired again, the shot hitting Issei's left arm above the elbow. Issei fell once more, the pain driving ragged breaths into his lungs. His vision blurred at the edges. Asia entered through another door, alarmed at what she saw. She recoiled at the evidence of the violent attack. Fried asked her whether she had set up the barrier he had requested. Asia covered her mouth with her hand, clearly unable to comprehend the carnage. Fried explained to Asia that this was their way killing those who had summoned devils. Asia recognized the injured man and realized with shock that he was the same person who had helped her earlier. She exclaimed that Issei was a devil. Issei coughed up blood and, struggling to breathe, apologized for having hidden his nature. Fried turned the situation into a test for Asia, saying that since she was still a beginner, she should make this her first kill. He handed her the gun. Asia's hands trembled and tears formed at the corners of her eyes as she stared at Issei. Asia refused to comply. She declared that Issei had been kind to her and did not deserve to die, then threw the gun away and stepped forward to help him. Fried reacted with a threat of severe punishment and then lashed out. He swung his blade of light, tearing through Asia's habit and leaving her stunned and disheveled. He moved quickly to restrain her and pinned her against the wall. A tense silence followed as everyone froze, the room filled with pain, fear, and the weight of what had just happened. Asia's expression was unmistakable. Fear and terror begged for someone to help. Issei wanted to save her, but he could not move with bullets in his limbs. He told Asia he was sorry. Asia's hands were pinned above her head by a sword of light that had pierced her sleeves, holding her in place. She was clearly terrified and unable to move. Issei could not bear to watch. He blamed himself for answering that call and letting things get this far. He closed his eyes because he did not have the heart to watch. Issei shouted for Fried to stop with what little energy he had. He knew he could not stop the attacker alone, but he hoped to buy Asia time to get away. Fried taunted him, mocking Issei for being unable to see. Issei could only hope someone would arrive. A bright red glow spread across his eyelids from somewhere in the room. Swords clashed, and when Issei opened his eyes he saw Kiba locked in combat with Fried. The red glow came from a magic circle, and Kaneko, Akino, and Rias emerged from it. Rias warned Fried not to harm a member of her peerage. Fried shouted that the confrontation only made him more violent. He broke under Kiba's blade and charged at Issei, intent on continuing the attack. Kaneko grabbed Fried's sleeve, spun him, and sent him crashing onto the couch across the room. Issei told the others to handle Fried and said he would rest. He began to close his eyes, exhausted. Yumma shook him awake and warned that Issei was hallucinating and needed immediate healing. Yumma instructed Kaneko, Akino, and Kiba to keep the exorcist occupied while she prepared another magic circle to remove Issei from the scene. Then everything went dark to Issei. The three members nodded in unison and sprang into action. Kiba and Kaneko charged at Fried with flashy, attention-grabbing moves designed to draw him away from Issei, deliberately avoiding lethal strikes. Akino found it difficult to create openings in the confined space, but she made her way to Issei to examine his wounds. Asia had collapsed onto the cold floor, shaken and unable to move after the attack. Akino reported that one bullet had lodged near the elbow of Issei's left arm and the other in his right knee. Both bullets were enchanted with holy magic, she explained, which accounted for his hallucinations and passing out. It also made sense given Issei's recent emergence as a new devil. As she finished her assessment, Rias completed her magic circle. A second circle appeared as well, blue and patterned with cloud motifs that marked it as fallen angel magic. An exorcist announced that backup had arrived and that the devils were outmatched. While Fried screamed, he retreated into the circle. Kaneko carried Issei with her impressive. Fried found himself alone in the house, waiting for reinforcements he no longer needed, while the approaching fallen angels prevented him from harming Asia further. The next day at the church, Raynare had shut herself in her room since the day she took Issei's life. She refused to leave except to use the bathroom or take meals. She was tormented by guilt and grief. She regretted what she had done and mourned the change she had witnessed in him, remembering how he had become kinder and more considerate for her sake. The fact that he had loved her despite everything made her remorse all the deeper. Calawarner brought breakfast to her room and asked if Raynare had seen Asia. Raynare shook her head and accepted the plate. Calawarner urged Raynare to go outside and suggested that she search for the nun while the others prepared for a ritual. Raynare protested, insisting the ritual was forbidden and that they could not perform it. Calawarner countered that orders were orders and implied the directive might come from a higher authority. Raynare stood firm in her belief that her father would never have authorized such a thing and refused to follow what she considered a false command. She agreed to go look for the Argento girl after breakfast. Raynare distrusted the other fallen angels. She believed they rarely questioned orders and tended to follow commands blindly, even when those commands did not come from their true superiors. Raynare had a bad feeling about this. The magical portal opened in the middle of the ORC. Kaneko placed Issei on a couch and tore the sleeve from his injured arm and leg to expose the wounds. Kiba retrieved a medical scalpel and tweezers to remove the bullets. He had some experience with removing fragments from broken swords while learning bladesmithing with his sacred gear, but nothing at this scale. Rias prepared to heal Issei as soon as the bullets were removed. Akino stood by Kiba's side, acting as his assistant and ready with whatever he might need. Kiba's hands trembled. He had never removed holy bullets before and the situation felt like life or death. Akino urged Kiba to stay calm and told him he could do it. The encouragement steadied his hand and helped him focus on the task. Kiba began with Issei's arm, taking care to avoid major vessels and cutting only what Rias could mend later. He saw that one bullet had come to rest close to the bone and had caused a small crack. Using the tweezers, he carefully extracted the projectile while Akino managed the bleeding and bathed the wound with demonic energy to counter the holy element affecting Issei. After a long breath, Kiba moved on to the knee, which proved more difficult. The kneecap had been badly damaged, with broken fragments obscuring the area and making it hard to locate the bullet. Kiba slowed his movements, trying to disturb the damaged bone as little as possible while removing the fragments that blocked his view. Issei soaked the couch with sweat and groaned from the pain. Kaneko wiped his face and set a cool towel on his forehead to help, and used her strength to keep him still when he squirmed. Akino continued to ease the worst of the effects so Rias could finish the healing once the bullets were out. When Kiba finally removed the last bullet, he stepped aside. Kaneko carried Issei to the showers where Rias waited to clean and heal his wounds, and Rias began stabilizing him. Kiba collapsed onto a couch, drained from the pressure and focus the operation had demanded. The next morning sunlight woke Issei. He found himself in his bed a few minutes before his alarm was due to ring. He sat up reluctantly and inspected himself. He remembered being shot twice the day before, but there were no wounds on his arm or leg. Relief washed over him, and then he realized someone must have healed him. He searched the house for any sign of Rias but found none. Since it was Saturday and there was no school, Issei dressed in trainers and a red shirt and resolved to get stronger. He promised himself he would learn to stand and fight so he could protect the defenseless. He headed to a nearby park to train. The park had the usual playground equipment, a sandbox, swings, and monkey bars. He started with stretching and then moved to pull-ups on the monkey bars. He was not exceptionally strong compared to others, but he knew the supernatural threats he faced would demand much more training. After an hour of exercise, he took a break on a swing. Asia approached and stood before him, surprise on her face. He had not expected her to be free from the church and wondered how she had managed it. Issei offered to take Asia to a nearby diner to talk about the previous night. He ordered burgers, fries, and colas for both of them, and they sat in silence while waiting for the food. When the meals arrived, Asia examined the plate with a puzzled expression. He wondered whether Asia did not know how to unwrap her burger or felt guilty that he was paying. Asia offered to show him how to eat it. He unwrapped his burger and took a big bite. Asia watched with wide eyes. She admitted she had not known he ate like that, then took a small bite of her own burger and said it was delicious, looking especially cute. When he asked what she had been doing at the park, Asia explained that she had taken a break, walked around town to get to know the place, and then seen him. He told himself that if she knew anything about the fallen angels he would find out, even if it meant going on dates just to learn more. He forced down his selfishness. He invited Asia to have fun, and she agreed. After they finished their food, they spent the afternoon the way he had once with Yumma, arcade games, window shopping, small comforts of a simple date. They laughed and joked. He won a plush T-Rex for her, and she lit up when he gave it to her. He found her endearing in a gentle, cat-like way, but he reminded himself that Yumma was the one he loved. They ended up in a park with a fountain and sat on a bench. Asia asked bluntly whether he was still hurt from yesterday. He answered that his master had healed him and removed the bullets, so he was okay. Asia then told him she had been abandoned by her mother at birth, left in a basket outside the church, and raised there. When she was 8, an injured dog had wandered into the church. She prayed with all her heart, and a series of events followed that brought her to a larger church. People traveled to be healed by her prayers, and she felt happiness in helping others. The adults around her used her gifts for their own purposes. She went on to say that one day she had healed an injured boy she should not have helped. The church declared that anyone who used divine healing on a devil was a heretic, and as a result she lost her home and became one of the fallen. Even so, she never forgot the joy of praying and remained grateful to God. She accepted that there were people who wished to do evil and believed it was all part of a larger plan. If she could overcome this obstacle, she believed God would one day make her dreams come true. When he asked about her dream, Asia said she wanted many friends, to plant flowers with them, to buy books, and to talk all night, simple things she had never been able to enjoy because she had no friends. He promised to be her friend and reminded her that they had already spent time together and had fun. Asia seemed a little happier. He then asked whether the fallen treated her as badly as the priest had. Asia replied that most did not, but there was one who had been kind to her. When he asked for the name, she said it was Raynare. Asia's eyes widened in surprise, and she pointed behind him, saying that the person she had mentioned was there. He turned and saw the girl he had been searching for only 30 meters away, wearing the same uniform she had worn when they first met. His heart stopped. He ran toward her, calling Yumma's name. Yumma stopped and turned. When she saw him, her eyes filled with tears and her lips moved as if to say his name. He reached her and embraced her tightly, never wanting to let go. She wrapped her arms around him in return, and he felt his own tears come as if she were his last lifeline. Yumma apologized to Issei with a voice full of sorrow. He reassured her that she had done nothing wrong and that he could never hate her. She cried harder and held the hug more tightly. He broke the embrace to look at her face. He thought that pretty girls should not cry and gently wiped away her tears. Issei smiled when Yumma returned his smile and could not help leaning in to kiss her. The kiss was gentle and filled with relief. When they broke apart, Issei hugged Yumma again and told her that he had missed her so much. Yumma replied that she had missed him too. Their peaceful moment was interrupted by a scream. They separated and turned toward the sound. It was Asia who was screaming, being taken by the man in the fedora who had nearly killed Issei before. Issei ran toward them, trying to reach Asia before the man could do anything to her, but the man spread his wings and flew away. Yumma stopped Issei by grabbing his arm and reminded him that the man was the fastest flyer in their group and that chasing him alone would be pointless. Yumma said she knew where he was taking Asia and why, and that they would need help to rescue her. Issei said that he knew just the people to ask. He called Rias and arranged to meet at the Occult Research Club room with the rest of the peerage. Issei and Yumma walked to the school in silence, holding hands all the way to the clubroom. Yumma explained what would happen to Asia if they did not hurry, and Issei felt even more determined. At the ORC door, Yumma commented that she could sense a lot of demonic energy inside. Issei urged her to come in, promising they would be safe. He pushed the door open and led Yumma into the room. Rias was leaning against her desk, looking at her nails. Kaneko sat on a sofa eating sweets, and Akino was pouring tea into Kiba's cup. All of them tensed when they sensed the fallen angel's presence and turned their heads. Issei revealed Yumma, explaining that a nun was being held captive and that he wanted to rescue her. Rias asked why they should risk themselves for the nun. Everyone else looked skeptical. Yumma stepped forward and explained that the nun would have her sacred gear removed by midnight if they did not intervene. When Yumma named the sacred gear, Twilight Healing, Rias visibly stiffened. Rias decided they had to try to save the nun. She stood up and organized the team, directing everyone to gather and look over the map of the church they would be infiltrating. The plan focused on key roles. Issei and Kaneko would enter through the front door, Kiba would follow as backup, and Yumma would stay with Rias and Akino as part of the broader operation. A few hours later, around 11 at night, Issei and Kaneko approached the church. Kaneko forced the door open, and Kiba was told to arrive about 10 minutes after them. Inside, moonlight filtered through the windows, casting long shadows across overturned pews. The wooden floor creaked under their footsteps, and every sound made Issei uneasy. They reached the end of the nave and at first saw nothing. Then a voice spoke. Fried appeared, leaning against the wall beneath a window. He taunted Issei, reminding him of their previous confrontation and vowing to make him pay. Fried pointed out a cabinet and indicated that the stairs to the basement were hidden underneath it. He warned that Issei would not get near the nun because he intended to stop them. Fried produced a weapon that formed a blade of white energy, the same sinister effect from their earlier encounter. Issei readied himself, summoning the red gauntlet on his right hand and taking a defensive stance. He knew he could not take Fried alone and hoped that Kaneko or Kiba would provide support. The two opponents faced each other, eyes locked, each waiting for the other to make the first move. We stood like that for 3 minutes until Kaneko broke the silence. Kaneko asked what the two of them were doing, her voice as emotionless as ever. The narrator explained that they were staring into each other's eyes with intense feelings, teasing that they were waiting for the other to act. Kaneko and the narrator looked at Fried with an expression that asked what he had just said. Fried responded that he was being sarcastic. The narrator face-bombed but decided to try to teach Fried some manners. The narrator stepped closer and put an arm around Fried's neck in a familiar, brotherly way, explaining that this was supposed to be a life-or-death situation and sarcastic jokes were inappropriate there. Fried listened and nodded, apparently understanding. The narrator returned to the stare-down with Fried. A pew flew at Fried, and he reacted quickly enough to slice it in two. The narrator joked at Kaneko for interrupting the tense moment, but Kaneko, unreadable, tossed another pew. This time Fried did not react quickly enough and was knocked to the floor. The narrator moved to the hidden stairs and said they would go save Asia. Fried shouted that they were not going anywhere and fired a shot that missed by inches as he pushed himself out from under the pews. New footsteps echoed through the church, and a newcomer demanded to test his skill against Fried. Fried sneered that he had better things to do, threw down a device that produced a flash of light, and disappeared. Kiba shrugged at Fried's disappearance and came with them to the stairs. Kaneko pushed a cabinet aside and the three of them rushed down. The stairs descended far deeper than the narrator expected. At the bottom they found a large wooden double door with a medieval feel. Kaneko opened it to reveal a huge chamber. At the center a raised platform held Asia bound to a cross-like structure. Nearby stood the man in the fedora, and hooded priests surrounded the platform, drawing glowing swords as the door opened. The narrator cried out Asia's name and saw her in tattered clothing, slumped and barely conscious. The fedora-wearing man sneered that the narrator had come to save her and mocked their honorable goal before claiming that it would end in both their deaths. The narrator forced a plan: stay focused, rescue Asia, and get out alive. The fedora man proclaimed that the intruders had defiled a holy place and ordered the priests to smite them. The priests advanced with swords ready. Kiba told the narrator to go save Asia while Kiba and Kaneko held the line. Without hesitation, the narrator sprinted up the stairs as the sounds of battle rose behind them. At the top, Asia cried out as a green light began to emanate from her chest. The light floated into the hands of the fedora man, who absorbed it into his own chest and then revealed 2 rings on his hands. He commented on the color and his new power. Asia slumped back, released from her restraints. The narrator caught her before she reached the floor and laid her down gently. The narrator assured Asia that she would be okay. Asia weakly said the narrator's name and struggled to stay awake, breathing shallowly. Her face was flushed and she was sweating. The fedora man declared that he could not allow the narrator to leave alive and intended for both of them to die. Fearing a trap, the narrator did not wait to be attacked. The narrator took Asia and jumped down the stairs, passing Kiba and Kaneko who were still fighting the priests, their numbers greatly reduced. Kiba shouted that the narrator should run and that he and Kaneko would create an opening. Kiba blocked a swinging light sword as the narrator fled with Asia toward the exit. Kaneko did not say anything and kept fighting. Issei ran back to where they had fought, freed, breathless and exhausted. Carrying someone up those stairs had been no easy task. He laid Asia on one of the still intact pews and shook her shoulder, trying to wake her. Issei urged Asia to wake up and, when gentle shaking failed, he shook her harder. She opened her eyes halfway, her face flushed and slick with sweat, hair splayed across the pew. Asia weakly told Issei that she was glad to have made a friend, and then she closed her eyes. Issei felt tears gather and clenched her hand, hoping it was only a nap, though he knew better. Then a voice taunted him from the doorway. The man responsible for Asia's death mocked the sight of a devil being hopeful in a church. Rage and hatred flooded Issei, all aimed at the man who had taken an innocent life. The man announced that he would give Issei a warrior's death and prepared himself. Issei could feel the weight of his sacred gear on his right wrist. Fueled by blind anger and with no plan, he charged. As he reached the man, the attacker took to the air, his dark wings spreading close to the ceiling. The man held his arms wide and light coalesced into solid spears in his palms. Issei's sacred gear activated, boosting his strength. The man uttered a farewell and hurled the spears. They came too fast for Issei to dodge. Spears struck his legs above the knees, sending searing pain through him. The pain spread like poison in his mind, but he refused to give up. If he fell, he would take the man down with him. The attacker explained that even a twice-critical hit could be strong depending on the user's will, and Issei felt the answer blossom inside him as his dragon booster awakened. More power flowed through him, surprising both combatants. The man expressed disbelief, while Issei reached for the spears embedded in his legs and pulled them free, each movement burning with pain. He paid no mind to the wounds themselves, focusing only on stopping the attacker. Issei threw one spear, which the man dodged. The second struck the man's left wing and staggered him. Summoning the remaining strength, Issei ran and struck the man's chest, knocking the wind from him. The attacker gasped and struggled to speak, clearly weakened. Issei, however, had lost a great deal of blood. His legs could no longer support him and he collapsed. A heavy silence settled, broken only by ragged breathing. Issei fought not to think about Asia or his own looming mortality, and instead let his thoughts drift to the fight downstairs, hoping Kaneko and Kiba were holding their own, and to Yumma. He had only just found her and the thought of losing her now was unbearable. She had been guiding him toward being a better person, and he did not want that to end. A voice called his name from where the door had been, and the sound of running footsteps echoed through the church. Yumma rushed in among others, standing above him. Someone gently lifted Issei's head and set it down on something soft. Yumma's tearful face leaned close. Issei reached up and touched her cheek, and he told Yuma that she should not cry and that she looked better when she smiled. After that, everything went blank. Rias and Aquino were watching the man known as Donasik. Rias glared at him with deep hatred for what he had done to her newly added peerage member. The injury and near death were unforgivable. But with the attacker down, Issei's safety was their priority. Rias instructed Aquino to take Issei to the clubroom for healing and to try to mitigate the effects of the light spears. Aquino nodded, and Yuma stood aside, leaving Issei in Aquino's care for the moment. Aquino formed a magic circle around herself and Issei, and in a flash of light they vanished, leaving the others in the room. Rias turned back to Donasik. The fallen man lay injured on the floor, too damaged to heal himself with the sacred gear he had stolen from Asia. Rias confronted him, demanding what he had to say in his final moments. Donasik cursed them through his injuries. In response, Rias extended her arm and unleashed a dark red wave of destructive energy, the power of annihilation, to deal with him. Energy flared and wrapped around the man, and with a bright, otherworldly burst he vanished, leaving only scattered dust and a pair of rings glowing with green light on the floor. Shortly after Fedora Man's defeat, Kiba and Kaneko came up from downstairs battered and bruised but moving. Rias asked if Kiba and Kaneko were all right. Kiba said he was mostly fine and waved away Rias's worry. Rias nodded and picked up the glowing rings to examine them. They were simple, with small light green gems on top that reflected like tiny mirrors, letting Rias see her own face in each stone. Yuma agreed that the rings and the twilight healing clearly belonged to Asia and needed to be returned to her. Rias explained that she could only save Asia by turning her into a devil and asked Yuma if Asia would be okay with that. Yuma agreed, while also thinking about Issei's safety. Rias walked to Asia's body laid out on the pew, placed the rings on her fingers and a bishop piece on her chest, and recited words from the old devil language in order to revive the former nun. The bishop piece sank for a moment, the rings vanished and then reappeared on Asia's fingers. After a few moments Asia began to stir, stood up, and opened her eyes, looking around in confusion. Rias told Asia not to worry and that she had been brought back to life at Yuma's request. Asia asked where Issei was. Rias explained that Issei had been injured and had been brought back to the clubroom for treatment, and that because she had been brought back to life, Asia was now a devil. Asia's eyes widened in shock. She had never expected anything like this. Asia clutched the pew as a sudden pain passed through her head. Rias told her she should avoid using God's name now that she was a devil, and suggested getting her cleaned up and dressed before coming to school with them, since she looked the right age. Asia, still confused, nodded. Yuma asked if she could go with them because she wanted to be near Issei. She hoped to attend school with him and possibly move in someday. Rias observed that Issei seemed to care for Yuma a great deal and said there would be no problem as long as Yuma did not become a burden to the devils. Yuma hugged Rias and thanked her repeatedly, beaming with happiness. That night Rias healed Issei in the clubroom after bringing Asia and Yuma there. Once he had been treated, Rias returned Issei to his bed as if nothing had happened. Asia was given a school uniform to replace the rags she had been wearing. Rias also spoke to Sona about the former nun joining the school. Sona had no objection besides the late-night paperwork. Issei woke to his alarm, which featured a recorded voice of a girl with a chainsaw and a hockey mask taunting him for not waking up. He sat on his bed, rubbing the sleep from his eyes and trying to remember the previous night's events. He recalled being in the church, going downstairs, getting Asia upstairs as she died, fighting Fedora Man, and then both of them ending up on the ground injured. He assumed Rias had intervened again. Issei thought about how much he disliked getting up for school and went through his morning routine before heading downstairs for breakfast. His parents had not noticed anything unusual. They behaved as if everything were normal, which made him sigh and resolve to learn some of the devil magic everyone else seemed to know. The walk to school was peacefully ordinary, which suited him perfectly. As he entered the schoolyard, he was met by his two friends Matsuda and Motohama, the local troublemakers known for their embarrassing behavior. Matsuda greeted Issei and asked if he had slept well. Issei said he had gone to bed late. Matsuda made a teasing comment, which Issei dismissed. Issei scolded them lightly and punched Matsuda's shoulder. A sudden pain flashed through his head and he grabbed at it, reminding himself to choose different words in the future. Motohama asked if he was truly alright. Issei said his brain was just a little slow that morning. On the way to class, Murayama and Keitase crossed their path. Issei greeted them and chatted a little while they kept their distance from his two friends, which Matsuda noticed with confusion. Matsuda wondered why they could talk normally with Issei but not with him and Motohama. Issei replied that he was different from them, and reflected that it had taken Yumma's influence for him to change the way he behaved. They sat at their seats in the classroom and waited for their teacher to arrive. I put my backpack on the table and used it as best I could as a pillow, then drifted off to sleep. The teacher called Issei and warned him that he would get a week of detention if he did not wake up. I jerked awake and told him that I was up. The rest of the class giggled and glanced at me, trying to suppress their laughter. The teacher sighed and continued with the lesson, but I only wanted to catch up on sleep. The teacher then announced the arrival of a new student, Asia Argento. I thought of how I had seen her die, then realized Rias must have used the same method on her that she used on me. Now Asia appeared to be a devil too. I wondered how she had taken it, and the smile on her face suggested she was fine. She was surrounded by classmates asking questions, so I put my head back down, relieved that she seemed okay. The teacher invited Asia to take a seat at the front. I fell back to sleep, only to be shaken awake a few minutes later. I mumbled that I wanted 5 more minutes, my voice muffled against my arm. Yumma offered to let me rest later with her, drawing surprised whispers from other students. I looked up, turned to her, and hugged her tightly. I could not believe she was here at my school, and by her uniform it seemed she was a student too. Her arms wrapped around me and I felt a warmth I had missed. I whispered that I had missed her, and Yumma replied that she had missed me as well. The hug was perfect but awkward in a classroom full of students and a teacher, so we broke it. The teacher reminded Amano to refrain from making hasty judgments about people she did not know. Girls in the room watched us with dreamy expressions, as if we were the happy ending of some romantic movie, while the boys looked confused, annoyed, or jealous. The teacher directed Amano to take the seat next to Asia. I thought it unfair that he did not seat us together, but Yumma walked over and sat beside Asia, immediately surrounded by classmates firing questions at her. I rested my head back on the table and chuckled at how quickly she had been swallowed by the crowd. The teacher regained control of the class by threatening detention, and when the bell rang everyone rushed to question the new girls. Asia managed to escape the horde, and Yumma eventually freed herself as well, but before she reached me my two friends intervened. Motohama told Yumma that they had some business with me and asked to speak with me privately. He and Matsuda escorted me to a corner of the classroom, delaying my conversation with Yumma. They asked where I had found her, and I reminded them that it had been on the bridge near my home. They agreed that she was very attractive and said they were proud that I had found such a lovely girl. I warned them not to objectify her. Matsuda begged me to set them up, and I promised I would see what I could do. They let me go and told me the girls were waiting for me. I took Yumma's hand and led us toward the old school building, where not many students went except members of the Occult Research Club. As we turned a corner in the hallway, I asked how she had become a student here. She said that she had asked Rias to enroll her so she could be closer to me. We reached the ORC door and I felt a wave of déjà vu as I turned the knob and entered. Inside, the rest of the Occult Research Club was already gathered, and Asia was there too. I had no idea how she had escaped the mobs, but she had managed to join us. Rias turned to us, clearly expecting our arrival. Rias welcomed Yumma and Asia to the Occult Research Club with a dramatic flourish that settled into calm composure, and she complimented the clever disguise. Yumma agreed and tightened her grip on my hand. Akino smiled with her eyes half closed and asked whether I liked that my girlfriend had been placed in the same class. I thought I could not be happier. I needed to catch up on sleep, though, so I let go of Yumma's hand and lay down on the opposite couch from where Kaneko was snacking. Yumma followed and sat at one end. I rested my head on her lap, and she gently stroked my hair as I tried to doze. After about 20 minutes, a new voice announced itself in the room. Rias greeted Sona as she entered. From my prone position, I could hear Sona suggest introducing the new peerage members since both sides had additions. A young man with messy blonde hair and a vacant expression then remarked that there was a fallen present. Sitting up, I took in his appearance. He was about my height. Rias confirmed that there was indeed a fallen among us but explained that she posed no threat because she had already joined Rias's peerage. Rias asked the fallen to introduce herself. Yumma stood and walked forward. She introduced herself as Raynare and added that Yumma was her human name. I realized I had been calling my girlfriend by the wrong name and made a mental note to talk to her about it later. I stood to introduce myself as Issei, the new pawn of Rias Gremry. Asia likewise introduced herself as a bishop. Sona then introduced herself and pointed out her new pawn, Saji Genshiru. I recognized that Saji and I held the same piece in our respective peerages. Sona raised the matter of the familiar forest and the full moon tomorrow, noting that familiar masters accept only one peerage at a time. Sona's voice was monotone and lacked emotion. Rias accepted the implied challenge and suggested settling it with sporting events the next day, with the winning team taking their peerage into the forest. The two leaders' rivalry was clear in their tones. Sona and her peerage then took their leave. I was about to bring up the name issue with Yumma when Rias interrupted to tell me she had news. Rias explained that, since Raynare and I were a couple and Raynare had enrolled at the school, she had arranged for Raynare's official residence to be placed at my address as well. I asked what that would mean for my parents, and Rias said that a little magic would take care of any complications. A short while later I found myself standing in front of my house carrying some of Yumma's luggage while Rias spoke with my mother and father.